Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for finding time to attend today's webinar. My name is Laurel Rodriguez, and I am the Director of Marketing at SureImpact. Our topic today is how to demystify data to drive your organization's impact. Our speaker today is Sheri Chaney Jones, founder and president of SureImpact and Measurement Resources Company. For more than 18 years, Sheri has improved the social sector using performance management, evaluation, and organizational behavior best practices. She is the author of Impact and Excellence, Data-Driven Strategies for Aligning Mission, Culture, and Performance in Nonprofit and Government Organizations. Just a quick note, we'll answer questions submitted by you found in the Zoom meeting panel. Feel free to submit as many questions as you would like. Although we may not be able to answer them all, we can certainly address them in our follow-up. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to Sheri.
Thank you, Laurel. You guys, if you know me, you know that I absolutely love to talk to audiences about data. And I am overwhelmed with the amount of registrations we've had for this particular webinar. I think during COVID, this particular webinar has exceeded highest ranking registration list. So this is amazing. And we're very excited to talk to you about just demystifying data. We hear all the time, data-driven cultures, and we need to have data, and show me your data, and where is your data? And we use that word all the time, but do we really understand what it means? So let's just talk practically about what we can do in our organizations to bring data forward for the benefit. And so I've got a few things I want to talk to you today. Some mindset shifts that we need to adopt as social sector leaders. I know that all of you on this call, you have a big mission to play in this world. You have a lot of lives you want to change. You want to make communities a better and happier place. And let's talk about how data is your friend and how and why you should love it as much as I do. So the first thing I wanted to share with you is that data will determine your destiny. And if you and your organization, you want to raise more funds or achieve more revenues, if you want to increase your efficiencies, COVID has turned our world upside down in so many ways. And so maybe you're looking for right now, like, I need to make an impact. My mission has not changed. My funding might have decreased or my funding sources might have driven up. However, I still need to make an impact. I desire to. That's why I'm here, put on this earth to make an impact. Well, we need to find ways to do that efficiently. So we need to figure out what is going to drive the needle? Where do we need to put our investment so we will have the most impact? If you want to get those stories in the newspaper, on social media, now that we've been, a lot of the ways that we used to connect and network and share our story have been suspended for a while. And so we need to think about new ways. And unfortunately, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, one of the best platforms we have right now, and for some cases, some of the only platforms we have right now, are media outlets, whether it's traditional media and or social media. So how do we get those stories, and how do we get people wanting to share with us the great work that we're doing? Engagement. If you want to engage staff, you want to engage your stakeholders, engage your volunteers, engage your community, the clients, that's another thing, right? You may have an amazing program, but if people are not in your programs because they can't find you, because your traditional community outreach efforts have been shut down or cannot be done safely, then you need to figure out, how do I engage these audiences to continue my good work? Policy change with everything we've seen going on between health inequities and racial injustices, structural racism, gender biases. There's so many things that this current environment where we're living in has been elevated, and data is what is going to help us change those policies to create the world and the society that we all want to be living in. And most importantly, impact. If you want to be sure that you're creating an impact and know what that impact is, all of these results that we all are desiring to achieve require data. some research I did all the way back in 2010, which showed that if organizations had data aligned with their mission and they were using it strategically, they achieved all of these different organizational outcomes at 2 times the rate of organizations who didn't. So data is going to be your friend. And that's why I'm so passionate about it, and I hope it's why you're here today as well. But when I've for nearly 10 years now, I've devoted my life to going across the country, speaking to audiences like you, talking about creating high-performing measurement cultures, talking about the importance of data, and I get people excited and they're ready to use it and they want to adopt it. They get so many questions. And those questions stop them, because when we don't have clarity, when we don't know the concrete next steps, we often get stuck. And so today is about getting you unstuck, answering those questions that you may have, answering those questions that you might be too embarrassed to ask because you think the other person sitting next to you doesn't have those questions. Well, let me tell you that given all the conversations I've had with thousands of social sector leaders, you're not alone. Most people don't know where to start, especially in the social sector, because most social sector leaders, whether you're a social worker by trade, or you went into nonprofit management or public administration, and you have a passion for making the world a better place, most people have done that because they went into that for those reasons. They didn't go into it to be a statistician. They didn't go into it to be a data scientist and be in a program evaluator. Right? Data was not something you loved. It wasn't something that you spent a lot of time thinking about. In some of my audiences, I find that people chose social work over psychology because of the math requirements, and that's totally fine. So you might be wondering, well, I hear you, Sheri. I hear you. The data is going to make a difference for my organization, but I don't know what the best measures are. I don't know where to start. I don't know what to measure, how to measure, when to measure. Once I have the data, what do I do with it? And do I have the skills I need to get it done? So if you're wrestling with those questions, or if you've had those questions in your teams before, you are in the right webinar. And I have some good news for you today. It is not as complicated as you may think, at least what we're going to talk about today. You know, I know that especially now, there's a big movement towards big data and predictive analytics and data science, and all those things are great. And they definitely advance society and can help us in a lot of ways. However, there's a large spectrum between, you know, running Python analyses and just making sure that your social sector program, whether you're in a nonprofit or a government organization, that you have the right data to know if your programs are working. You have the right data to know where to put your investments, to where to put your resources, to make sure that you're getting the impact that you desire to get. There's a big difference. And something else that a lot of people don't understand is that we will get a call through the company I run called Measurement Resources. We might get a call, people will say, you know what, we would love for you to predict, you know, which of our clients are going to be successful. So in that case, that's going to be a little bit more in your more advanced statistical models that we have to run to develop that. But if you don't, if an organization, it doesn't have in place what I'm going to talk about today, we can't run those analyses for them. So we have to start where we're starting from, right? Just like you have to meet clients where they are, I want to meet you where you are. And you are probably somewhere on the spectrum of, in terms of the data that you have in your organization's data literacy, how you're using data. And that's really where we're going to start today, is let's kind of bringing it back to basics. And knowing that really cool algorithm stuff and predictive analytics, it's out there. And we can do that, but we're not going to do that today. And so we're really, I'm hoping to inspire you to see it's not as complicated as you may think. All right. So I want to get to know a little bit more about you so I can tailor our content today for you and answer questions that you may have, target some of the examples I gave to you. So what I'd like you to do in the Zoom chat, I would like you to type, if you had a crystal ball, what questions would you want to know in regards to your programs and services? So knowing this will help me use some examples or some practical advice as we go about. So feel free in the chat section to go ahead and type in your answer. So put it in the chat. If you had a crystal ball, what would you want to know about your programs? All right, Alex, how can we increase donor funding? You will talk about ways you can use data to increase donor funding. Long-term success rate, right? So do people still have the impact that we're trying to achieve later in life? How effective your programs are. The impact of your project, best way to determine impact, Pat asks. What factors are driving participant success in programs? We are in the right room today. This is amazing. Susan, are we making an impact in the programs we are implementing using the tools we have? That's amazing. Yes. Tom wants to know which of my data collectors is providing good quality data. That's definitely, quality data is so important, and I'm going to talk about ways to ensure quality as well today. What else? Come on, guys. Tommy, how to accurately measure all outcomes from a single program and service. Okay, we'll talk a lot about things that you should consider in terms of what are good measures for your programs. These are great. Anything else? Who are the best community partners to match participants with? Ooh, Trish, I like that. That's a fun kind of study. It actually goes to my roots there. Elena, determining the right data to use. All right, Elena. I know you have some good data in your organization. All right, what else? Alberto, from a foundation's perspective, how do we know the organizations we fund are making an impact? Ooh, that makes me really excited that foundations are wanting to make sure that their investments are sound and that they are driving change. This is all great. You guys are definitely in the right webinar. So hopefully we'll have a fun ride today in the next several minutes, and I'll share with you some of my thoughts. And I'm going to use those questions that you shared with me to guide our conversations. Hopefully you'll pick something up that you can start using this afternoon if you wanted. All right, so first things first, if the word data scares you, let's reframe it. Because there's so many different words that data means the same thing that are more familiar and less intimidating. So maybe we should just take the word data out of our vocabulary, because that word in and of itself, it's kind of cold. You kind of, it brings up images of like zeros and ones. And so let's just take that word out of our vocabulary. And what we're really talking about are facts about our programs. We're talking about evidence. We're talking about knowledge. We're talking about proof, metrics, measurements, right? We are wanting this information. It's really data's information. We want this information to achieve a greater good. So again, data in and of itself it's a useful tool. And that goes into my measurement mindsets. I've got several measurement mindsets I want to share with you today, because I think, and I am an industrial and organizational psychologist by training, and you can take an IO psychologist out of the traditional IO psychology setting. However, you cannot take that fundamental training and worldview out of me. So everything I do comes from this psychological lens. And so even when we're talking about data and using data in our organizations to drive change and thinking about what measurements we should use, we have to have the right mindset. So many of you probably with your clients and other people think about cognitive dissonance, right? And if we have inconsistency between what we believe and what we do, we don't take action. So we need to have alignment with what we believe and what we do before data is going to be something that we embrace, that we figure it out, that we're willing to do trial and error, that we're willing to make the investments, that we're willing to overcome our own maybe insecurities or challenges or confusions around it. So let's talk about measurement mindset 1. And these mindset things are that if you as a leader embrace them, or if you can get your whole team or your organization to embrace these concepts around measurement and data, then It makes creating a culture and using data to move your mission forward so much easier. So our first mindset tool that I want us to adopt is that data is a tool that makes our lives easier and leads us to what we want. So that's the fundamental thing we have to understand. That data is a tool. Just like if we wanted to build a house, we know we'd have to use some hammers and we'd have to use a screwdriver and we'd need lots of tools that I don't even know because I'm not a construction worker. But if you understand that, you cannot build a house without those tools. You cannot create lasting social change without robust data and measurement systems. And so we need to really think about that we need to care about tracking impact so we can do more of it. I often tell a story about when I first was hired as the Deputy Director of Performance Evaluation with the Juvenile Courts. One of the programs that they had been doing for years, we learned that we're actually making kids worse than if they weren't assigned or enrolled to the program anyway. So we needed that data to make sure that we were not making kids worse. And hopefully that's not your case. And I think most programs, that's not their case, but we need to know it for sure so we can continue to do what works and stop doing what doesn't work. We also need to, we want to individually improve as social sector professionals, right? I know you're here because you want to make the world a better place. You want the best practice models. You want the things that really move our society forward, and data is going to help you do that. And then also the importance, and we're going to talk a lot more about this today, but the importance of real-time data collection and proper analysis and how that can save so much time and resources to you in the future. All right, so measurement mindset number 2. It is essential for your organization's survival, period. Set that in. It is essential for your survival. Now think about it in terms of a human lens, right? Your own survival. You know that eating is essential for your survival. You know that drinking is essential. Drinking water is essential for your survival. So we do those things without even thinking about it. We just do them because we know that without doing those things regularly, we will not survive. And when we think about our social sector, our government and nonprofit organizations, especially our nonprofit organizations, if we don't have data and we don't have impact in our current climate and our current environment, as the access to data and information is increasing daily, we will be left behind. So we just have to recognize that whether we like it or not, we're good. We're going to get on this data-driven train because it is essential for our survival. And because, you know, unfortunately, we're in a bit of a recession. We're in a bit of a time of uncertainty. We don't know how if our corporate funders are going to come alongside of us this year. We know the government funding pools are drying up. And so it's going to be more competitive. We're going to have to prove that we are worthy of the dollars. In addition, we want to be able to continue to provide the services that we provide. And without data, we may not be able to do that. All right, measurement mindset number 3. Data literacy is a critical job skill for me and my team. So if we embrace the fact that, okay, data is essential for our organization's survival, data is going to help me reach my goals and get me where I want to be, well, then it's an essential literacy skill. It's a skill that I need to learn, I need to adopt, that my team needs to learn it. Regardless of where you are in a social sector organization, data literacy is key. So the good news is that's what we're going to talk about today. Some really basic data literacy, some things to consider. So if you're a leader, and we'll be sending the recordings out later, they'll be on our website. You can share this webinar with your team to help bring some of that data literacy to them. So the ability to collect, manage, evaluate, and apply data to solve challenges is a critical job skill within the social sector. And when your team has this type of literacy, they have these types of skills, it will allow you to generate improved outcomes faster because you're all on the same page. You don't have anyone on your team that's afraid of using data or is not using data or not entering data, not because they are being obstinate, they just don't know how, and they don't want to let you know that. And so when we embrace a data-driven culture, we also have to then embrace data literacy. It goes hand in hand. So that's what we're going to talk about. So the good news is that you have what it takes. I know that you and your team have what it takes in order to increase your data literacy skills, to put them into your organization, to be a hero to those you want to serve, and to move your missions forward. You have what it takes. Sometimes you just need a little coaching, a little refresher, because maybe you took a stats class or a program evaluation class back in graduate school 20 years ago and you've forgotten. So today we're just going to review some of the basics, inspire you to think about the data you have in your own organization and how you can use it in new and interesting ways, or think about things that you might want to collect that you haven't been collecting and thinking about how you can do that in an efficient and easy way. Are we good? Are we ready? Okay. So what we need to do to make data drive our decisions, because there's one thing that drives me more crazy than anything else, and that is an organization that has data, but when I ask the question, what do you do with it? They look at me like I'm speaking a foreign language. So it's like, oh yeah, we have these Excel spreadsheets, or we have this data in this system, or we have, oh, I also love when I get oh, here's our data, and they show me like a stack of papers, right? That's not a data-driven culture. That is, you have an input, you have a raw material, but you have not taken that raw material and put it towards good use. So it's not just about having numbers somewhere in a spreadsheet, it's about taking that information and using it to drive social change. So the very first thing is we have to realize that data must be analyzed and acted on regularly, not just at the end of the grant cycle. We have to stop these practices of just, oh, well, a year later, an evaluator swoops in or my grant manager swoops in and shows me this report with some numbers they collected. We've got to stop that practice. There's nothing wrong with that practice. That's like, step one, we've got to integrate those data systems into our day-to-day lives so we can constantly be making change. We also need to review collecting and analyzing data as a way to investigate and answer the many questions required to run an impact-centric organization. I think I like to find the blessings in all things. And there are, this particular season in life, there has been a lot of challenges. But one of the blessings that I've pulled out of this particular season in life is when we think about how now in the public zeitgeist, data has become something that we talk about all the time, right? We talk about following the science or looking at the numbers, and a lot of that is related to COVID and COVID testing and COVID data and positive cases, death rates, and all that stuff that's been in our worldview right now. But what I see when I see all that is that I see people using real-time data, making decisions, changing their mind, changing their policies more frequently because of new information. And that is what a data-driven culture looks like. And that's what I want for your organization, where you are constantly looking at the key metrics that matter most to you and are pivoting and refining and moving forward faster because of the insights that you have. And also, you have to meet regularly as a team to discuss the data and reveal, how to build on those revelations, how to use it. Because I think that's another thing that COVID has kind of brought to light too, is that we can have these dashboards or we can have these numbers, but unless, let's take it back to your team, that your team needs to trust that this data is real, and you need to have those conversations. You can't just take the insights that you receive and go off and run and make some decisions without checking in with those stakeholders, without asking some tough questions like, hey, we see this trend, what does it mean to you? We need that buy-in, we need that relationship, or data can backfire. So we need these three pieces in order to really create a data-driven culture. So I'm just curious, because data can be used, we talked about how the importance of data is to be used. So I am curious to know that in your organization, you've got to pull up on the screen, so please go to your screen right now and let me know how your organization is currently using data in your management activities. These are all the different ways we should be using data every single day in our organization. So if you're familiar with some of my work, I wrote a book called Impact and Excellence. And part of the research in that book was around looking at an organization's measurement culture score. And this particular question was one of the keys to getting a measurement culture score. So it really looked at how were organizations using data. And so this is fascinating to me. Thank you for sharing your results here. Let's see if 10 years later, the results are similar. So performance improvement, program planning, that's great. Very excited to see that. We've got the majority are accountability to clients and stakeholders, awesome, and strategic planning. So that's awesome. Then we look at the kind of the less likely ways that people are using it. And this is managing operations, right? I see that and I'm like, wow, only 44% of you say you're using outcome data to manage operations. That's or budgeting. You're not using data to decide where to put your investments. Some of you are, but that quality assurance, that's fascinating to me, right? And so we can see as a sector that there's a lot of ways to improve. And so as you're thinking about your own organization and think about how do we use data in our organization? Is it just a bunch of numbers on a spreadsheet? Or are we actually incorporating this and have a reason why we're doing this? Have we thought about why we're collecting all this data and what we're gonna do once we get it? And so based on what we're gonna use our data for is gonna inform our research design. And so now we're gonna talk about some different types of data that you could be collecting or that you should be collecting. I think every organization should know that what output data they're collecting, what quality data they're collecting, what outcomes data they're collecting. So all organizations should have what is done data. That's your typical, how many participants did you serve? What services did they receive? How much money did it cost? You know, how many community engagement activities did you do? So these are really just the count of what you do. And a lot of nonprofits and government organizations are pretty good at counting what they did. But not only should you know what outputs you have, but you have to understand what are you going to do with that data? How are you going to communicate it, or are you going to communicate it? You know, I like to ask the question, so what? So you know you served 1,000 kids last year. Is that good? Is that bad? I don't know. It's just a fact. You produced a widget. You put 1,000 kids through a service. So outputs data alone is not enough, but it's important. Don't stop collecting it. You've got to have your outputs data. But you need to go a little bit farther. You need to have quality data. You need to understand how well it was done. So those are going to be things around maybe client experience or cultural competence services or how accessible was the service. Those are things that will drive, we're going to talk about outcomes in a minute, but quality and outcomes are often very, very related. And so if you don't have your quality data, then and you're not seeing the outcomes that you desire, it's very hard to know why your programs are working or not working. And so if we know, if we know that 30% of our clients are not getting better, I would want to know why. Why are they not getting better? But without our quality data, we can't answer that question. We just know whether they're getting better or they're not getting better. And if we want to dig in and really understand, was it because our the time that we offer our services was not convenient? And that's why. Or that our providers were not culturally competent. That's a quality metric, right? So we want to think about our quality metrics and then, of course, our outcomes. And that's how our participants or communities are better off because of the work that we're doing. And when we have all three of these types of data, then we can start to answer all those questions that you asked at the beginning. Then we're able to ask ourselves, why am I getting the outcomes? Or what programs are more effective? Or can I invest less in this program and still drive these outcomes? But without all of these data points and thinking about how are you going to use them, And not only how are you going to use them, but how are you going to use them together in relationship with each other? Then data is just really something on a spreadsheet. I saw some chatting. I'm just going to check real quick. Earl, is there any questions?
Yeah, so there actually is a question from Thomas Williams. So part of the challenge is changing the mindset of measure once and we are done to a mindset of always looking at what is happening. So maybe do you have a recommendation of how to get started changing that mindset?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really great point, Tom. And we're going to talk about the difference between like point in time and more ongoing data in a minute. So maybe that when we talk about that, it'll help you think through a way to inspire your team or those that you're working with to change that mindset as well. Okay, great. All right, well, we'll keep going, but please keep typing in your chats, because I know part of when Laurel and I were talking about what webinar do we want to do this month, we got really excited about having something that would be more, in some ways more back to the basics, but also having the time and the flexibility to really answer those questions about, what types of things you may want to be measuring. So if throughout this presentation you're thinking, man, I'd really love to know how Sheri would measure this, let me know. So also when we think about data, data is important for the entire ecosystem of your organization. And I think that is really key to understand. That every person in your organization should have a data-driven mindset that we talked about earlier. They should believe that data can help them do their jobs better, all the way down from the customers and the clients you serve, right? Because whether we think about it or not, if we're in the social sector, we're in the business of service. And in order to be in the business of service, we need to make sure that we are meeting the needs of the people that we want to serve. And they're gonna wanna know that data, right? Think about it. When you buy a car, most of us read the reviews. We think about the performance. We look at the gas mileage. We consume information about products that we want to buy before we buy them. And even if it's in the social sector context, our clients are no different. If you're providing mental health treatment services and you want to help somebody who may need your services, well, they're still going to have to make a conscious decision to not only go to your a particular provider or to get help, but they're going to want to know that you care about them and that you can prove to them that the things that are important to them, you achieve for them. And so data is going to help you do that. It's going to help you make sure you're meeting your clients' needs and that you can share that data with your clients so they know that they want to come see you. And that's another reason, Tom, when you think about ongoing data, that will build that case for support for even people wanting to engage in your system and in your service. Then we think about frontline staff. We've done, as a sector, generally, we've ignored our frontline staff when it comes to data-driven cultures. So historically, this is what happens. Leadership says, we need to collect this data for this grant. Hey, line staff, case manager, caseworker, whatever, program officer, program manager, whatever they're called in your organization. Here's a form or an Excel spreadsheet or something we need you to fill out every day, all clients, all the time. And they're thinking, I'm here to make a difference. And that's busy work. That's busy paperwork. It's distracting from my core purpose in life, which is to help this family get the needs they need. And so until we give frontline staff access to those results, that they're able to see in a more real-time way how you use that data, how it will help them be better at their jobs, we're going to have data compliance issues. We're going to have, maybe tension in our organization towards creating the data-driven culture. So we need to make sure that the frontline staff understand how the data we're collecting will help them do their jobs better and be mindful of that. And then, of course, supervisors and managers, they need to understand that what was done, how well it was done, and how are people better off for their own programs. for the things that they have control over, so they can have those performance conversations with their frontline staff and make their programs better. Of course, we know why grant managers and evaluators, they need the data, they care about the data, they're the consumers of the data to do their jobs. But they also need efficient and effective systems so that, especially grant managers, right? They need that data when they need it. The grant opportunity comes, and what we see normally is that a grant manager needs to start talking about how you're going to measure success and impact, and then they go to the program managers, and the program managers like, oh, I don't know. And so they make something up because they haven't been thoughtful and intentional within your organization, and then it just never works, right? It's not a data-driven culture, it's an afterthought. And then our executive teams, they need that data to fundraise for the organization, to show their board the accountability. And then again, funders and collaborators need that information in order to decide what works. Are my investments working? Where should I invest in the social sector? And so we're going to talk some about SureImpact in a minute, but the SureImpact approach is really about connecting the entire social sector ecosystem so that data is part of everyone's job, and it's all connected, and we all understand why we're using it and what we're doing with it and why it is important for our overall mission, and that's to move, whatever your mission is, forward. All right, so here's some practical back to basics, like when you're thinking about your own organization, what do you need? So there's two types of data. So there's historical data. So those are going to be, trend data, and maybe you have somewhere in your office Excel spreadsheet somewhere for 2015 data, 2016 data, 2017 data. So that will give you a great sense if you have time and energy and effort to put it all together and look at it. That's going to give you a good sense of what happened. And it's also going to give you a sense of, if you can trend it, it's going to give you a good sense of how things have changed over time. So we definitely want historical data just to understand how things have changed over time and if we're getting better or if we've seen things disruptive. But sometimes it's limitation of just having historical data. Like let's say, you don't look at your data until the end of the year. So if you're now using 2019 data because the way your organization works with data is that, we collected all of the data in 2019, so we use that to make decisions for 2020, and then we're going to use data, we'll look at our 2020 data at the end of 2020. The challenge with that is our world is so ever evolving. Your funding cycles are changing constantly, and you don't have that real-time knowledge to make sure that you're operating on the very best platform. And so really what I inspire you to think about, if you have historical data, that's great because there's a lot of insights you can gather from that, but think more about how can we get to real-time access? How can I log in and know at any given time how well I am doing in achieving the things that I desire to achieve? How well am I moving my mission forward? And so real-time data is that you understand what's going on, what trends are happening, what's happened in the last day, what's happened in the last week, what's happened in the last month. So you can pivot quickly when you start to see things changing, or you can ramp things up if you start to see things improve. All right, this is my favorite concept to talk about, and that is for moving from just collecting outputs to just collecting outcomes. So when we talk about outputs data, which I talked about a little earlier, it's that what did we do? So that's, there are 20 kids in our after school programs. So it talks about the number of kids that we serve, which sometimes people use that as a measure of impact. It is not a measure of impact. Let me tell you that again. How many kids you serve, how many people you serve is not an impact measurement. It is how many people you reached or touched, but it does not mean their lives are any better off today than they were yesterday. And you are not a for-profit business. A for-profit business can use how many people they serve as a proxy measure for impact because the people that they serve paid money for that goods and service, and therefore it's a little bit of a better measure because someone said, I want this service, I gave you the service, and as an organization, my mission is to make money. So not me, but a for-profit business, their mission is to make money. So the more people they serve translates into more revenue. Is not true in the social setting. So outcomes are important. Outputs are important, and we need to measure them. But what we really need to move our organizations to, if we want to be able to drive to the destinations that we want, are our outcome measures. So those are things like improved academic reading skills, or academic success in math. 80% of the kids in our after-school reading program saw an increase in their academic success in math. Or they improved their mental health symptomology. Or they were stably housed for an entire year. Or they graduated from high school. Or they were able to maintain a job for 12 months. Or their income went from $8.50 an hour to $15.50 an hour, right? That's how we measure, do we make our people, the people that we're serving, are they better off because of our work? Those are the measures that need to drive our decisions. Because if we serve 1,000 people in a workforce development program, and all we're doing is putting them into $8.50 an hour jobs, guess what? We're still gonna have those 1,000 people living in poverty. We're still gonna have those thousands of people having the issues that happen when people are living in poverty, not having access to affordable housing, maybe still needing, maybe food insecurity, right? So we need to know our outcomes, and we should be driving all of our decisions to outcomes. But write this down if you haven't been writing this down. The good news is there's really only few, if you think about these questions, it'll help you decide what outcomes you should measure. So that is change in knowledge or skill, change in behavior, change in reduction in behavior. So you can have like improved behavior or reduction in behavior, maintenance in behavior, improved social or economic status, improved health outcomes, or improved economic development outcomes. And I might be missing one, but really those are the type, there's very few outcome categories, and I list them all out in my book, and we can send them out to you after this webinar. But there's just really few outcome categories. And so if you're struggling with what should my outcomes be, look at those outcome categories and ask myself, does my program improve skill and knowledge? Does my program improve behavior? Does it increase positive behavior or reduce negative behavior? Does it increase economics for my participants or my community? Right? So we can start with those frames of questions and then decide, how does my program do that, and how will I measure? Another point we need to talk about is point in time versus longitudinal data and the differences between them. So point in time data is good. It gives us a sense of where we are. We can do something. We're currently working with a housing provider, and it's been really fascinating because it's been an 18-month-long study to look at their impacts. And so the individuals that are in this program, they started being discharged from a psychiatric hospital and are being placed in a scattered site subsidized housing. And so we did a point in time evaluation after 30 days to kind of look at stability. So is everyone still housed? How well are they coping? What are their mental health symptoms? And so we could have been done with that and said, great, we did this. 30 days later, everyone looks good. All right, our program is great. Let's continue to bring more people out and do that. Or we chose to take a longitudinal approach and are tracking these individuals for 18 months. And what's been fascinating to be looking at this 18 months is to see the swings and to understand where the trends in time, where these individuals, maybe we start to see like, well, after 9 months, they start to struggle a bit, right? So really understanding the longitudinal data, that's data over time. And if we just looked at May's data, or we just look at January's data, we might make some decisions that might be bad, because maybe what we've done is we've missed some seasonal swings, or we've missed some circumstances. Think about, and we're very sensitive to this now, some of the projects that we had going on during the middle of COVID. It's that, are we capturing the right information, or how biased is our data right now because of COVID? And we have another project where we're analyzing data from students, their youth functioning scores, and looking at it pre-COVID and post-COVID by diagnosis. And it's fascinating because the students who had school-related anxiety, their youth functioning scores have seen significant improvements since the lockdown, where other students with some other diagnoses have not seen improvements, right? So it helps us understand what's going on and who we need to help and when we need to help. So longitudinal is very, very important. And I highly encourage that your organization consider, how do we have multiple data points that are in real time so we can look at not only trends over time, but see changes over time as well. Also, qualitative versus quantitative data. This is something that people get hung up on. So most social service programs, your data is going to be technically qualitative. Now, before you get all freaked out, that's okay. You know, when we think about quantitative data, that's going to be things like your weight, if you're in health outcomes, maybe your blood pressure. So those are going to be more of your quantitative data. Those are the things that you can observe. You have standardized, measurement tools. Now, when we're in the social sciences, most of our data is qualitative, especially, trust me, Ecological Society of America is one of our clients. And they remind me every single time I talk to them that how we're evaluating their program is qualitative data. Because they're used to measuring soil samples. That's quantitative data. So, but before you get all caught up and think, I've got to use surveys, I have to use perception data, I have to actually go and ask my clients what their life is like to measure my impact, it's okay. And we all know this because the United States Census is going on right now. Census data is qualitative data. And we base so much of how we fund programs and everything in qualitative data. So it's okay. Tell your board, it's okay that if you are using a survey, as long as it's good and it's been validated, or you've used great psychometric principles and you didn't just throw it together, but you've invested in looking in the research and other things, or consulted with a measurement expert, qualitative data is fine to measure change over time, to measure impact. So I want to alleviate this notion of, oh, I can't count that. It's okay. You can use a survey. It's fine to use surveys. That's how you're going to measure success. So that's one of the questions I always get. And it's okay. You can use surveys. Surveys are a great way. It's probably the most primary way that we evaluate most programs. All right, so I've had so much fun. I realize that I'm like running out of time. So in order to move to impact-centric organizations, we need to do these things in our organization. So think about your own organization. First, you need to clearly define output, outcomes, and impact metrics that align with your organization's unique mission. So just ask yourself, what do I do? What change am I trying to see in my clients? What change am I trying to see in my community? Or what population changes do I want to see, right? That's going to help you define what you want to measure. Then you need to develop those effective and efficient systems that are incorporated into the natural workflows of your organization. So ask yourselves, okay, so this is what I want to know. How can I effectively get that data? Is it a survey? How often am I going to distribute the survey? How am I going to distribute the survey? Then in an ideal world, you want timely data and reporting and communication and constant communication to staff so that it's not a chore. It's not like, oh God, it's time to write those reports. It's just, oh, boom, here's my data, yay. And then you want a process for making data-driven improvements and evaluating and celebrating effectiveness. And that means putting it on your calendar, having those quarterly meetings where we're gonna review where we are, we're gonna talk about data-driven solutions, we're gonna talk about where we pivot, making it part of your culture. So last mindset shift that you need to make is that the good news is we live in a world where technology is making data-driven decision-making so much easier. We still have to do the hard work to define what's important to us and what we want to collect. However, technology will take you to those destinations quicker. It will save you time in data analysis. It will save you time in data quality and cleaning. It allows for those real-time insights that are so important. It will allow you to create those longitudinal trends over time. You can get to those data-driven decisions faster. So you have those insights. You're not spending days upon days analyzing data, because that's the barrier to a lot of people and why they don't create a data-driven culture. And so this is something, as I've evolved in my own practice and in my own journey, understanding those barriers. The barriers where organizations only had that point in time data, or they only had historical data. They didn't have the ability to analyze the what did we do, how well did we do it, and how are people better off in an efficient and effective manner. And so we've evolved and we developed SureImpact, which is a case management platform. So it's a data inputting platform that thinks like a program evaluator and an impact generator. So you've got everything you need in one place, and your staff have access to it. Your management teams have access to it. Your funders have access to it. Your boards have access to it. So everyone has that real-time data to have those data-driven conversations. And so if that's something that you think that your organization could benefit from, I would love to talk to you more about how SureImpact can help you in your organization. And before I open it up to questions, I'm sure you have tons. I just want to let you know some more opportunities to go even deeper in these conversations. The first is we're bringing back, so several years ago, I offered a Managing to Outcomes boot camp where teams went through and we worked together to define what data you should measure, what systems and how you should measure it. And so if you find yourself after this webinar thinking, oh, this is great, Sheri, I really want to work on developing my logic model and developing my key metrics, we're going to be offering a 6-week boot camp where your teams can come together and increase their data literacy and work on that. And then we're also having an upcoming webinar on maximizing your impact and turn data into dollars. And that's going to be through, I'm going to say it wrong, Laurel, it's a nonprofit learning lab. Is that it?
Yeah, it's the Nonprofit Learning Lab.
Okay, great. So we'll have more information to you about that as well, just to continue the conversation. And so once you've got all this great data and you created these measures, how do you maximize it so that you can increase your funds? So I have a few more minutes left. If you have any burning questions, I'd love to help you process or think through them.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you, Sheri. We do have some questions that have come through. Mm-hmm. So the first one is from Rhonda Henneman, and she said, with COVID, how do we manage program data for evaluation and reporting?
With COVID, okay. So I think that's where having technology is key to your operations. Because if you can't, if your staff are working in dispersed sites, so maybe they're working at home, you're gonna need a secure place in a repository where people can input data. And so all of the projects that we've been working on through COVID, we have not had any problems continuing evaluation and data collection activities. We've just moved it all virtual. So if we were doing qualitative data in the form of a focus group, we've now done it in virtual focus groups. If we've been, if we need to get our clients to fill out an assessment every 30, 60, 90 days, we'll either get them through email or text or phone call, but we have a secure location that everyone who's collecting data can input that data into so that it's not living in someone's machine somewhere on their calendar, or it's not paper somewhere, that it's actually in an electronic system that allows us to do work. So I think, I'm not exactly sure if that answers your question, but in terms of using technology to collect evaluation data has not been a problem for me and my team. So if you'd like to have a follow-up chat with that, I'd be happy to help.
All right, perfect. So next question is from Alberto Espinosa. He said, how do we know what data to collect related to the work we do, outputs, quality, outcomes, and how do we set up those systems to collect the data?
Okay, that's a huge question. I think you should join the Managing to Outcomes Bootcamp. But in all honesty, what I like, my very first thing I like to tell people to do is first to create a logic model. And I think if you go on our website, we have some like, Laurel, what webinar would be great for him to look at? Is it outputs versus outcomes, where we talk about project models? But what I would, so we've got some other resources on our website, but what I would recommend is that you think about what did you do? That's pretty easy. That's just a count of the services and the people you serve. Then when you start to think about outcomes, we use exercise, the 5 whys exercise, and you ask yourself, why do you do what you do? And so if it's to improve academics or improve health or improve housing or whatever it is that you're trying to improve, that why is an outcome. And so once you can define that outcome, you can start to brainstorm what is the best way to measure it. Now I will say that SureImpact has created for our users that are on our platform, we've created a measures library that is, so if you are a housing organization, we have embedded into our technology, well, here are 5 ways that other housing programs like to measure impact, or here are how 5 different after-school programs, have found effective to measure impact. So we have some of those tools built into the SureImpact program to help you set it up. And it also is a cloud-based, easy and effective way to measure success. But there are other ways to really think about your workflow and when you interact with clients and where you can get data to set up some of those systems.
Okay, perfect. So next question was from Linda Henriksen. So she had a question about, so the section where you talked about what is and what isn't impact data. And she said, currently our impact summary for 2019 identifies who our organization served and variations on categories of how many, or of how they may be identified, where they came from, etc. So there is a reference to social impact value. So she was just wondering if you could clarify.
Oh, interesting. So basically, I'm how like who you served or where referrals were coming from isn't good information to track. But my point is that it doesn't necessarily speak to the fact that someone is better off because they engaged in your programs than if they didn't. And really that's what impact is all about. It's about that somebody's life is better and that your funders, because your funders invested or donated into your program or service, they've made a difference in someone's lives. And so maybe the number of people you serve is a good measure of talking about how many people you serve, but it goes beyond that. It's about what is different about their lives now. Do they have access to, one of the measures that we talk about is increased social status or increased economic status. So, or, increased access to basic needs or stable housing, or, so it's really thinking about what are those circumstances that have changed for that person, and how does that because that person now has a better, housing status, or they have better access to education, or whatever it is that, or increased job stability, whatever it is that you're working to achieve with that individual, what then does that translate into social costs? So that's a whole nother webinar we could do around social return on investment, but in terms of what is now the community benefit because that person's life has changed. And so when we start to expand our idea of impact, we can become so much more competitive with our message and with our sector, and inspire others to come alongside of us and continue to fund even when times are tight.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Sheri. We are out of time, so we are going to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you again for attending our webinar today. We will be sending out the recording and slides in the next few days. Also, as Sheri mentioned, make sure to join us for our September 30th webinar, Maximize Your Impact, Turning Data into Dollars, and keep a lookout for more information on our Managing to Outcomes Bootcamp that we will be doing. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day, everyone.
Great, thank you so much. It was so fun. I hope to connect one-on-one with you all soon. Bye.